The rain hammered against the windshield as the patrol car crawled down the empty Colorado highway. It was just past midnight when Deputy Marshal's radio crackled to life with a transmission that would rewrite everything law enforcement thought they knew about one of the state's oldest cold cases. His voice barely steady, he spoke into the receiver with words that seemed impossible. "Dispatch, you need to send backup to the station right now. I have someone here claiming to be Linda Carver." The dispatcher paused, confused, asking him to repeat. "Linda Carver," he said again, his breath catching. "The woman who disappeared in 1989. She just walked through our front door." Inside the station, under the harsh fluorescent lights, sat a woman in her late 50s with haunted eyes and trembling hands. She carried with her a worn leather bag, and inside that bag was something investigators never expected to see. Something that would force them to reopen a case that had been quietly shelved for more than 3 decades. This is the story of a disappearance that gripped a small mountain town, a marriage that hid unthinkable secrets, and a woman who vanished into thin air, only to return with evidence so damning it would shatter the carefully constructed lies of everyone involved. Over the next 12 minutes, we are going to walk you through every twist, every hidden clue, and every chilling revelation that led to one of the most shocking conclusions in modern criminal history. But first, you need to understand the one thing Linda Carver kept hidden all these years. The one truth she was never supposed to survive long enough to tell. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 133. T's Key Questions. To understand what happened that night in 1989, we have to ask the questions that investigators failed to answer for 35 years. How does a 22-year-old woman disappear from her own home in a town where everyone knows everyone, where front doors are left unlocked and strangers are noticed immediately? Why would she choose to stay hidden for more than 3 decades, living under a different name, cutting off contact with every person she had ever known? What could possibly be worth that kind of sacrifice? And perhaps most unsettling of all, what did Linda Carver bring back with her that made seasoned detectives go pale when they opened that leather bag? Who knew the truth all along, and who worked tirelessly to make sure she would never be found? The answers lie in the tangled web of 3 lives forever changed by the events of October 1989. Linda Carver, a young woman with dreams bigger than the small town that tried to contain her. Jacob Carver, her husband, a man whose charm masked something far more dangerous. And Ridge Valley, Colorado, a picture-perfect mountain community where secrets were buried as deep as the snow that blanketed the peaks each winter. According to testimony that has only recently come to light, one of these people knew exactly what happened to Linda the moment she vanished, and they have been lying about it ever since. 3 to 5. Backstory. Character setup. Linda Hayes grew up in Ridge Valley, population 3,000, nestled in the Rockies where the air was thin and opportunities were even thinner. She was the kind of girl who spent her afternoons wandering through the pine forests with her camera, capturing the way sunlight filtered through the branches, the way morning mist clung to the valley floor. Photography was more than a hobby for Linda. It was her escape, her way of seeing a world beyond the mountains that hemmed her in. Her high school art teacher once told her parents that Linda had real talent, the kind that could take her to Denver, maybe even further. But Linda never made it out. At 19, she met Jacob Carver at a county fair, and everyone said they made a beautiful couple. Jacob was 22, worked at his father's construction company, and had the kind of easy smile that made people trust him instantly. They married within a year, and from the outside, everything looked perfect. They rented a small house on Maple Street, went to church on Sundays, attended town barbecues, but people who knew Linda well started noticing changes. She stopped bringing her camera to gatherings. She became quieter, more withdrawn. Her sister, Margaret, later recalled asking Linda if everything was okay at home, and Linda just smiled that sad smile and said, "Marriage is just an adjustment. That is all." Neighbors began to notice things too. Raised voices late at night. doors slamming. Once, Mrs. Patterson from next door saw Linda sitting on the porch steps at 2 in the morning, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at nothing. When asked if she needed help, Linda simply shook her head and went back inside. Then, there were the phone calls. Linda's co-worker at the local pharmacy, Susan, remembered Linda receiving strange calls at work, calls that would make her face go white. She would hang up without saying much, and when Susan asked who it was, Linda would just say wrong number and change the subject. Susan also noticed bruises, small ones at first, on Linda's wrists, her upper arms, places that could be easily covered. And then, just 3 days before Linda disappeared, she pulled Susan aside during their lunch break and said something that Susan would never forget. "If anything happens to me, do not believe the first story you hear." 5 to 7 backstory deepens. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Linda had begun planning something she had kept hidden from almost everyone. Bank records later reviewed by investigators showed a pattern of small cash withdrawals, $20 here, $50 there, always from Linda's personal account that she had opened before the marriage. Over 6 months, she had quietly pulled out nearly $2,000. For a young woman working part-time at a pharmacy in 1989, that was a significant sum. She had also been making phone calls from the payphone outside the grocery store, calls that never appeared on the home phone bill. Margaret, Linda's sister, would later testify that Linda had confided in her about wanting to leave Ridge Valley to start over, somewhere new. She said Linda seemed afraid, but when pressed about what she was afraid of, Linda would only say she had made a mistake, that she had seen a side of Jacob she wished she had never seen. Margaret begged her to go to the police, but Linda refused, insisting that no one would believe her, that Jacob was too well liked in the community. Linda's journal, discovered years later hidden in Margaret's attic, painted an even darker picture. The entries from her final months were filled with desperation and fear. One entry from September 1989 read, "I cannot keep pretending everything is fine. He watches me constantly. He checks the mileage on my car. He goes through my purse when he thinks I am asleep. I feel like I am suffocating." Another entry from early October was even more chilling. "I am leaving next week. I have enough money saved. I will drive to Denver and disappear. He will never find me. I just have to make it through a few more days." But there was something else in those journal pages. Something that suggested Linda was not just running from her husband. She had discovered something she referred to only cryptically. "I found the papers in his truck," she wrote. "I was not supposed to see them. Now I understand why he has been so paranoid. If anyone else finds out, it will destroy him." What were those papers? What had Linda discovered? And did that discovery seal her fate? What Linda did not know was that someone was already watching her every move. 7 to 10 the incident. The night she disappeared, October 17th, 1989. The temperature had dropped to 38 degrees by nightfall, and a light drizzle had turned the streets of Ridge Valley slick and empty. Linda had finished her shift at the pharmacy at 6, stopped briefly at the post office, then driven home. Neighbors confirmed seeing her car pull into the driveway at approximately 6:45. Jacob's truck was not there. He had told co-workers he was leaving early to run errands, but no one could confirm where he actually went. At 9:14, Mrs. Patterson heard a scream. She described it later as sharp and sudden, the kind of sound that makes your blood freeze. She ran to her window but saw nothing unusual, just the Carver house, sitting quiet in the darkness. She almost called the police but talked herself out of it, thinking maybe it was just the television or an animal outside. At 9:20, Jacob called the Ridge Valley Sheriff's Office from a payphone near the gas station on Route 40, reporting that he had just gotten home and Linda was not there. He said her car was in the driveway, but the house was empty. He sounded worried, confused. Deputies arrived at 10:02. The front door was unlocked. Inside, everything seemed normal at first glance. No overturned furniture, no shattered glass. But as they searched more carefully, They found small signs of struggle. A lamp knocked slightly askew, a chair pushed back from the kitchen table at an odd angle, and in the hallway near the bedroom, they found a torn silver locket. The chain snapped, lying on the floor. It was the locket Linda wore every day, a gift from her mother. Jacob claimed he had no idea how it had broken. Outside, investigators discovered something even more troubling. Footprints in the soft mud beside the back porch, leading toward the tree line. They were small, consistent with Linda's shoe size. But there was a second set of prints, larger, deeper, suggesting someone heavier. Those prints followed Linda's into the woods. Then both sets disappeared where the ground turned rocky. A search team combed the forest for 3 days, using dogs, helicopters, volunteers from neighboring towns. They found nothing. No clothing, no signs of a campsite, no body. It was as if Linda Carver had simply been erased from existence. Jacob was questioned extensively. His timeline had gaps. He claimed he had been getting gas, but the station attendant did not remember seeing him. He said he had driven around for a while, thinking, but could not specify where. When asked about the state of his marriage, Jacob insisted everything was fine, that Linda had been happy. When confronted with neighbor reports of arguments, he admitted they had disagreements like any couple but nothing serious. Investigators found his behavior strange, but not criminal. There was no physical evidence tying him to any violence, no witnesses who saw anything concrete. The case went cold within months. Years passed, then decades, and Linda Carver became just another name on a missing persons list, just another unsolved mystery whispered about in a small mountain town, until 35 years later, when a woman walked into a police station in the middle of the night and said, "My name is Linda Carver, and I need to tell you what really happened." 10:12. The Return and Revelation. When Deputy Marshal first saw Linda sitting in the station waiting room, he thought she must be confused, maybe suffering from dementia or some kind of mental break. The Linda Carver he knew about from the old case files would have been 57 years old, and this woman looked every bit of it, with gray, streaked hair and deep lines etched into her face from years of worry. But when she spoke, when she looked him directly in the eyes and recounted details that were never made public, details only the real Linda Carver could have known, he realized this was no mistake. She told him about the locket, about the journal hidden at her sister's house, about the phone calls and the fear. And then she reached into her leather bag and pulled out a folder stuffed with documents, photographs, and handwritten notes, spanning 3 decades. Inside that folder was evidence of everything. Linda explained that on the night of October 17th, she had not been kidnapped by a stranger. She had run. She had seen Jacob coming home earlier than expected, had heard his truck pull up while she was packing her bags, and in a moment of pure panic and survival instinct, she had fled through the back door into the woods. She had been planning to leave the next morning, but something in his eyes that evening, some cold calculation, told her that if she stayed one more night, she might not survive it. She ran with nothing but the clothes on her back and the cash she had hidden in her jacket pocket. She hitchhiked to Denver, then further west, eventually settling in a small town in Oregon under a different name. She worked cash jobs, kept her head down, never contacted her family because she believed that if Jacob knew she was alive, he would find her and finish what he had started. But the most shocking part of Linda's story was not her escape. It was what she had discovered in the weeks before she disappeared, the secret she had kept hidden all these years. The papers she had found in Jacob's truck were financial documents showing that he had been embezzling money from his father's construction company, funneling tens of thousands of dollars into offshore accounts. He was planning to disappear himself, to leave Ridge Valley and start over with a new identity. Linda had accidentally uncovered his plan, and in doing so, she had signed her own death warrant. She had kept copies of those documents all these years, along with detailed notes about everything that had happened, everything she had endured. And now, she was ready to come forward, not for revenge, but because she had learned that Jacob had remarried, had children, and she could not live with the possibility that he might hurt someone else the way he had hurt her. Authorities moved quickly. Jacob Carver, now 60 years old and living in Wyoming, was arrested within a week. The evidence Linda provided, combined with a reopened investigation into the original disappearance, painted a damning picture. Forensic accountants confirmed the embezzlement. Former neighbors and friends came forward with stories they had been too afraid to tell decades ago. Stories of Jacob's controlling behavior, his temper, his threats, and though Jacob maintained his innocence, claiming Linda had abandoned him and was now fabricating lies, the case against him was overwhelming. In the end, Linda Carver's 35-year disappearance was not just a story of survival. It was a testament to the lengths one woman went to in order to stay alive, to protect herself from a man who saw her as an obstacle rather than a person. Her return sent shockwaves through Ridge Valley, forcing the community to confront the uncomfortable truth that they had believed a charming lie for over 3 decades, while a terrified woman lived in hiding, waiting for the day she would finally be safe enough to speak. Linda now lives quietly, reconnected with her sister, and continues to advocate for domestic violence survivors, reminding them that sometimes disappearing is not giving up. Sometimes it is the only way to stay alive long enough to tell your story.